I still remember the exact moment my father demanded access to my savings account for family emergencies. It was the same afternoon my sister Ashley pulled into the driveway in her brand new Mercedes SUV. Price tag still visible through the windshield. The contrast was jarring. Their financial crisis versus her $70,000 purchase. What they didn't know was that the modest savings account they were so desperate to access was merely a drop in my ocean. When I finally revealed my actual bank balance that day, their definition of family emergency transformed into something entirely different. So did our relationship. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Indianapolis, the kind where everyone had decent jobs, but nobody was rich. My parents, Thomas and Nancy Wilson, were both educators. Dad taught high school history, and Mom was an elementary school administrator. They made enough to keep us comfortable, but there was always this underlying current of financial stress in our home. Looking back, I can see that my parents lived slightly beyond their means. They weren't reckless, just aspirational. They wanted the appearance of success more than they wanted the security that came with prudent financial decisions. Our house was in a good neighborhood, but stretched their budget. The cars they drove were newer models, but financed to the limit. Family vacations were always a bit more extravagant than they could comfortably afford. My sister Ashley was 4 years older than me, and had always been the golden child. She was outgoing, popular, and knew exactly how to wrap our parents around her finger. When Ashley wanted something, she usually got it. New clothes for the school dance? Of course. Cheerleading camp that cost as much as a semester of college? They found a way. Meanwhile, I was always told to be practical, to save, to think about the future. Eugene is so responsible, they would tell relatives. As if my frugality was some innate personality trait rather than a necessary adaptation to the family dynamic. The truth was, I learned early that if I wanted something, I would need to earn it myself. I started working at 14, first mowing lawns in the neighborhood, then bagging groceries at the local supermarket. By 16, I was working 30 hours a week while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I saved everything I could, knowing that my college education would likely fall on my shoulders. When it came time for university, my prediction proved correct. Ashley had attended Butler University, with significant financial support from our parents. They had refinanced the house to help cover her expenses, something I discovered years later. When it was my turn, they sat me down for a realistic conversation about finances. "We just don't have the resources we had when Ashley was starting school," Dad explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "The economy's different now." "You're smart," Mom added. "You'll get scholarships. And you know how to work hard." They were right about one thing. I did know how to work hard. I earned a partial scholarship to Purdue for computer science, and I worked 3 jobs simultaneously to cover the rest. I barely slept for 4 years, but I graduated with honors, and, importantly, minimal debt. While at Purdue, I met Jackson Taylor in an advanced cybersecurity class. We bonded over our shared obsession with blockchain security protocols and spent countless nights coding in the computer lab. During our senior year, we developed a revolutionary encryption algorithm that allowed for secure but efficient processing of financial transactions. We knew it had commercial potential, but we had no idea how valuable it would ultimately become. After graduation, we turned down corporate jobs to launch our startup, Secure Trade. The first 2 years were grueling. We lived on ramen noodles and coffee, coding 18 hours a day in Jackson's basement apartment. We faced rejection after rejection from potential investors, until finally, a venture capital firm recognized the potential of our technology. The investment allowed us to hire a small team and refine our product. 3 years after founding Secure Trade, we were approached by Finance Block, one of the largest financial technology companies in the world. They offered to acquire our company for a sum that left me speechless, $2.7 billion. When the acquisition was finalized, after taxes and splitting with Jackson and our early employees, I walked away with just over $1 billion. The strange thing was, I felt no desire to change my lifestyle dramatically. I moved from my cramped apartment to a slightly larger one in a nicer neighborhood. I bought a reliable but modest Honda Accord. I still shopped at the same grocery store and wore the same brands of clothes. The only people who knew about my windfall were Jackson, my wealth management team, and my attorney. I made a conscious decision not to tell my family, at least not the specific amount. I simply told them that the company I had co-founded had been acquired, and I was now financially comfortable. I had observed how money changed relationships, how it created expectations and entitlement. And I wanted to protect the authenticity of my family connections. I did, however, start helping my parents financially, though in ways they didn't always recognize. When their roof needed replacing, I offered a loan that I never intended to collect on. When Dad's car broke down, I happened to get a great deal on a reliable used vehicle that I didn't need anymore. I paid off several of their credit cards anonymously, making it look like a bank error or promotion. For a while, this arrangement worked well. I felt good about easing their financial burden without fundamentally changing our relationship. But over time, I noticed a shift in their attitude and behavior. The thank yous for my help became less enthusiastic and more perfunctory. The frequency of their financial emergencies increased. My mother started dropping hints about their friends' children who supported their parents more substantially. The Johnsons' son bought them a condo in Florida, she would mention casually. Isn't that thoughtful? Ashley, who had married and divorced within 3 years and was now living in a house our parents had helped her purchase, began to take a sudden interest in my career. Your tech company must be doing well, she would say, eyeing my simple lifestyle with suspicion. You should really treat yourself more, or at least help out the family. I might have continued indefinitely with my subtle support, if not for what happened at Thanksgiving last year. I overheard a conversation between my Uncle Jack and my father that stopped me cold. I don't know what's wrong with Eugene, Dad was saying, his voice lowered, but still audible from where I stood in the hallway. He's always been tight with money, but now that he's successful, you'd think he'd loosen up a bit. We raised him better than to be so stingy. Maybe he's saving for something big, Uncle Jack suggested. Dad scoffed. Like what? He lives like a college student. Meanwhile, we're still struggling with your sister's medical bills, and he barely offers to help. My Aunt Meredith's medical bills. The same bills I had secretly paid $50,000 toward just last month after Mom mentioned their worry about them. The same bills they had apparently been using as a convenient explanation for their financial shortfalls with other family members. I walked back to the dining room in a daze. The pumpkin pie I'd been retrieving forgotten in the kitchen. As I looked around at my extended family, I wondered how many of them had been told I was selfish and unwilling to help. I wondered how many other emergencies had been exaggerated or fabricated. That was the moment I began to see the situation clearly, the first real crack in my idealized view of my family. It was also when I started paying closer attention to where my money was actually going when I helped them out. What I discovered in the months that followed would ultimately lead to the confrontation that changed everything. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in April. I was in the middle of a consultation with a nonprofit I was helping to improve their cybersecurity when my phone lit up with my mother's name. Eugene, honey, she said, her voice tight with what I now recognize was practiced distress. We need to have a family meeting. It's urgent. Can you come over tonight? Is everyone okay? I asked, immediately concerned despite my recent misgivings. We're all fine. Physically, she said, emphasizing the last word. But there's a situation we need to discuss as a family. 7 o'clock? I agreed, and spent the rest of the afternoon distracted, wondering what could be so urgent. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway that evening, my stomach was in knots. The presence of Uncle Jack's truck alongside my parents' cars only increased my anxiety. This was clearly more serious than their usual financial discussions, if they had involved extended family. The scene in the living room was set for maximum emotional impact. Mom sat on the couch, tissues in hand, eyes red-rimmed. Dad stood by the fireplace, his posture suggesting the weight of the world on his shoulders. Uncle Jack, my father's older brother and the family patriarch since my grandparents' passing, sat in my father's recliner, his expression grave. "Eugene," Dad said, reaching out to shake my hand formally, as if I were a business associate rather than his son. "Thank you for coming. We have a serious family matter to discuss." I took a seat in the armchair opposite Uncle Jack, feeling like I was being set up for some kind of intervention. "What's going on?" Dad cleared his throat and launched into what felt like a rehearsed speech. "Your mother and I have hit a financial rough patch. A serious one this time." He detailed a litany of unexpected expenses, property taxes that had apparently increased dramatically, a plumbing disaster that insurance wouldn't fully cover, and most significantly, Mom's supposedly worsening arthritis, requiring expensive treatments not covered by their insurance. "The medical bills are just overwhelming us," Mom interjected, dabbing at her eyes. "We're at risk of losing the house, Eugene." Uncle Jack leaned forward. "Your parents are too proud to say it directly, son, but they need substantial help. More than the occasional assistance you've provided in the past." I looked between them, processing this information against what I already knew. I had reviewed my parents' property tax records recently. There had been a modest increase, nothing dramatic. Their home insurance policy, which I had secretly upgraded for them last year, would have covered legitimate plumbing issues, and Mom's arthritis, while real, had been stable for years, according to what she had told me just weeks earlier. "I'm sorry to hear things are so difficult," I said carefully. "What kind of help are you thinking of?" Dad exchanged glances with Mom and Uncle Jack before reaching into a folder on the coffee table. He pulled out several papers and slid them across to me. "We need to be practical about this," he said. "We're getting older. Healthcare costs aren't going down. We think the most sensible approach is for you to add us as authorized users on your accounts." I stared at the papers. They weren't just requesting access to my accounts, they had already filled out the forms, requiring only my signature. There was an application for a joint checking account, authorization forms for my investment accounts, and even paperwork to add them as beneficiaries to policies I didn't even have. "This is quite extensive," I said, keeping my voice neutral with effort. "You're asking for complete access to all my finances. It's for emergencies only," Mom assured me quickly. "We wouldn't touch anything unless absolutely necessary. And it makes sense for estate planning," Uncle Jack added. "God forbid something happens to you. The family should be able to manage your affairs without legal complications." I was 32 years old and in perfect health. Estate planning was important, but this wasn't that. "I understand you're worried about money," I said slowly, "but this seems like an extreme solution. Maybe we could set up a specific account for emergency expenses instead?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Dad's expression hardened. "Eugene, we're your parents. We raised you, put you through school. I put myself through school," I corrected gently. "We gave you the foundation to succeed," he continued as if I hadn't spoken. "And now that you're doing well, you question our judgment? Our intentions?" The conversation might have continued in this vein if not for the sound of tires on gravel and the slam of a car door. Moments later, the front door opened, and Ashley breezed in. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, dropping her designer handbag on the side table. The paperwork at the dealership took forever. She looked different than when I'd seen her 2 weeks ago. Her hair was freshly highlighted, her nails newly manicured, and she was wearing clothes I recognized from luxury brands. But what really caught my attention was what she said next. "Did you see my new baby parked out front? Mercedes GLE. Fully loaded. The salesman said they normally have a 6-month wait, but they just happened to get one in with exactly my specifications." The cognitive dissonance was staggering. In the same house where my parents were claiming financial ruin and the potential loss of their home, my sister was gushing about her brand new luxury SUV that cost more than many Americans make in a year. I stood up and walked to the window. Sure enough, gleaming in the driveway next to my modest Honda was a brand new Mercedes SUV, still with the temporary tags. Through the window, I could see the price sheet on the passenger seat. $70,000. "It's gorgeous, Ashley," Mom said, her teary crisis apparently forgotten in the excitement of her daughter's new purchase. The white looks so elegant. I turned back to face my family, who seemed oblivious to the contradiction playing out before my eyes. "That's quite a purchase," I said carefully, especially given the family's financial situation that we were just discussing. A moment of awkward silence fell before Ashley laughed it off. "Oh, this isn't connected to Mom and Dad's issues. This is my own thing. I got a great financing deal." "Financing?" I asked. "So you're taking on significant debt while the family is in financial crisis?" Uncle Jack cleared his throat. "Let's not get sidetracked. We were discussing your parents' situation and the account access." "Right," I said, returning to my seat but unable to shake the feeling that I was being manipulated. "About that. I'll need some time to think about it and consult with my financial advisor. This isn't a decision I can make on the spot." Dad's face flushed with anger. "We don't have time for consultations and deliberations, Eugene. This is family. We need this handled now." "I understand it feels urgent," I replied. "But proper financial decisions are never made in haste. Give me 24 hours to arrange things appropriately." Mom and Dad exchanged looks that I couldn't quite interpret. "Fine," Dad finally said. 24 hours. But we need this resolved, Eugene. The mortgage payment is due next week. And we're already behind." I gathered the papers, promising to review them, and made my goodbyes. As I headed for the door, Ashley caught up with me in the hallway. "Don't be difficult about this, Eugene," she said quietly. "They've done everything for us. The least you can do is help them out without making them jump through hoops." I looked at my sister at her designer outfit, her expensive jewelry, her perfectly maintained appearance, and thought about the brand new luxury vehicle she had just committed to. Something wasn't adding up. "I'll do what's right for the family," I said noncommittally, and headed out the door. I was almost to my car when I realized I'd left my phone on the side table. Returning quietly to retrieve it, I paused in the hallway when I heard laughter from the living room. "That went well enough," Dad was saying, his voice entirely different from the grave tones he'd used with me present. "He's thinking about it at least. Did you see his face when I walked in with the Mercedes timing?" Ashley giggled. "Priceless. But he didn't even question it. Just like you said, he's always been naive," Uncle Jack's voice now. "Smart with computers but doesn't understand how the real world works. Once we get access to his accounts, we'll know exactly what he's working with," Mom added. "The company acquisition must have left him with a decent amount, even if he lives like it didn't. Remember," Dad cautioned, "start small. A few transfers here and there. Nothing that would make him shut everything down." I stood frozen in the hallway, my blood turning to ice in my veins. This wasn't about family emergencies or financial hardship. This was a coordinated effort to gain access to my money under false pretenses. And from the sounds of it, they'd been planning this for some time. I slipped back out the front door without retrieving my phone. I could get a new one. What I needed now was distance and clarity to process what I'd just discovered about the people I'd trusted most in the world. The next morning I called in sick to the consulting gig I had been working on and set up at my dining room table with my laptop. My mind had been racing all night with fragments of conversations, inconsistencies I'd noticed, but dismissed over the years, and the disturbing dialogue I'd overheard. Now I needed facts. My background in cybersecurity gave me certain skills that, while I'd never used them unethically before, I now employed to investigate my own family. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to understand the true situation before deciding how to respond. First, I looked into my parents' mortgage. They had refinanced their home not once, but 3 times over the past decade. Each time, they had pulled out substantial equity. The most recent refinance had been just 6 months ago, adding $100,000 to their mortgage balance. Where had that money gone? Their home showed no signs of major renovations or improvements. Next, I examined their credit reports. I had their information from the various times I'd helped them with financial matters. What I found shocked me. They had 6 credit cards between them, all carrying near maximum balances. The charges weren't for medical expenses as they'd claimed they were for restaurants, travel, clothing, and most recently, a $20,000 gift to Ashley marked as a family loan. Speaking of Ashley, her social media told a story very different from the occasional financial hardships she claimed when asking me for loans. Her Instagram showed 5 different vacations in the past year alone: Miami, Cancun, Las Vegas, New York, and a wine tour in California. All were tagged as much-needed work trips, despite the conspicuous absence of anything work-related in the photos. Her Facebook Marketplace history revealed a pattern of purchasing luxury items and reselling them months later at significant losses, only to upgrade to newer models. The deeper I dug, the more painful the revelations became. I found emails between my parents, discussing my college years specifically, how they had told me they couldn't afford to help, while simultaneously funding Ashley's graduate school and a down payment on her first condo. Eugene is resourceful, my father had written. He'll figure it out. Ashley needs more support to succeed. Then I found something that made my stomach physically lurch. A series of emails from just 3 weeks ago between my parents and Ashley discussing the loan of $30,000 money that came directly from the $50,000 I had given them for my aunt's supposed medical bills. The emails made it clear this was for Ashley's down payment on the Mercedes, planned and coordinated, while they were simultaneously crafting the story of financial hardship to present to me. But the most disturbing discovery came mid-afternoon. I found an email chain between my parents and Uncle Jack that referenced me directly. They were discussing my financial situation and speculating about the company acquisition. Uncle Jack had suggested that I must be sitting on a significant amount, but was too selfish to share it appropriately with family. More concerning was their discussion of how to legally gain greater access to my finances. If we can establish that he's not mentally capable of managing his own affairs, we could petition for power of attorney, Uncle Jack had written. His obsessive work habits and minimal social life could be framed as concerning behavior. My father had responded enthusiastically to this suggestion, adding that they had scheduled a meeting with their family attorney to discuss options. The meeting was set for next week. I sat back in my chair, feeling physically ill. The people I had trusted most in the world were not only trying to manipulate me for money, they were actively considering ways to wrest legal control of my finances by declaring me mentally unfit. As the shock began to subside, anger took its place. I had spent my entire life being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who worked hard and asked for little. I had secretly supported them for years, asking nothing in return except the maintenance of our family bond. And this was how they repaid that loyalty with deception, manipulation, and betrayal. For a brief, dark moment, I considered cutting them off entirely, changing my phone number, moving away, and leaving them to face the consequences of their financial irresponsibility. But something stopped me. Perhaps it was the lingering love I still felt despite everything. Or perhaps it was the realization that simply walking away wouldn't address the deeper issues at play. No. This situation required a more thoughtful response. They wanted access to my money? Perhaps it was time to show them exactly what they were trying to steal, and in doing so, teach them something about the true meaning of family, responsibility, and consequences. I picked up my new phone and called the one person I knew I could trust implicitly, Jackson. I said when my former business partner and still close friend answered. "I need your help with something complicated." "Eugene," he replied immediately. "Whatever you need." Over the next hour, I outlined what I had discovered and what I was considering as a response. Jackson listened without interruption, then offered his perspective and refinements to my emerging plan. By the time evening fell, I had the outlines of a strategy not just to protect myself from my family's manipulations, but to potentially transform the dynamics that had led us to this point. I would give them access to my finances, but not in the way they expected. And in doing so, I would create an opportunity for real change, if they were willing to embrace it. Before implementing my plan, I decided to do one final search, this time looking into the financial situations of my extended family members. Most revealed similar patterns of poor financial management. But one name caught my attention: my cousin Megan, Uncle Jack's daughter. Unlike the rest of the family, Megan had always been kind to me, without any apparent ulterior motives. We'd lost touch somewhat in recent years as adult responsibilities pulled us in different directions, but I had fond memories of her defending me when Ashley and her friends would tease me as a child. What I discovered about Megan's current situation broke through my growing cynicism. Her husband had been diagnosed with a rare form of cancer last year. They had 2 young children and had exhausted their savings on experimental treatments not covered by insurance. Unlike the rest of the family, Megan had never reached out to anyone for financial help, instead taking on extra nursing shifts and selling their second car to make ends meet. This was what a genuine family emergency looked like, not the manufactured crises my parents and sister had been presenting. And Megan, the one person facing real hardship, was the only one not asking for help. In that moment, my plan crystallized fully. This wasn't just about protecting myself or teaching my immediate family a lesson. It was about redefining what family support truly meant and establishing a new foundation for our relationships moving forward. I would proceed carefully, but decisively. The trap was being set for me, but I would spring one of my own instead. One that would reveal not just my financial truth, but deeper truths about character, responsibility, and genuine family love. The next morning, I called in my wealth management team for an emergency meeting. Patricia Winters, my chief financial advisor, and Marcus Delaney, my attorney, arrived at my apartment by 9 o'clock. Both had been with me since the early days after the acquisition and were among the few people who understood the full scope of my finances. "This is an unusual situation," Patricia said after I explained what was happening. Her normally composed face showed clear concern. Family financial entanglements can be particularly complicated. Marcus was more direct. "What they're planning borders on elder abuse, except you're not elderly. The discussion of seeking power of attorney under false pretenses is especially troubling from a legal standpoint. I don't want to sever ties completely," I explained. "Despite everything, they're still my family. But I need to establish clear boundaries and, hopefully, create an opportunity for genuine change." "What exactly did you have in mind?" Patricia asked. I outlined my plan in detail. Rather than simply refusing their request or confronting them with what I knew, I would give them exactly what they asked for: access to an account, but with several carefully designed conditions and revelations built in. First, I want to set up a decoy account with Fairfield Bank, I explained. Fund it with $80,000, enough to seem substantial to them, but a small enough amount that they can't do catastrophic damage. Patricia nodded, making notes. "We can have that established by this afternoon. The account needs to be connected to a custom banking interface," I continued. "Something that looks standard but has additional features we control. Can your tech team handle that, Patricia?" "Absolutely," she confirmed. "We've developed similar systems for high-security clients before." "Good." When they access the account for the first time, it should show only the $80,000. But I want to program a trigger after they attempt to make transfers exceeding a certain threshold. The interface should momentarily reveal my actual holdings before locking them out completely. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's quite theatrical." "It needs to be," I said firmly. "The shock value is essential to disrupting their current mindset. They've convinced themselves I'm merely doing well financially. They need to understand the magnitude of what they were attempting to manipulate their way into." We spent the next hour refining the technical details. The custom banking app would be installed on devices I would provide to my parents. It would track and record all their access attempts and transfer requests. Most importantly, it would activate the revelation protocol when specific conditions were met. Beyond the technical aspects, I continued, I want to establish formal requirements for any actual financial support moving forward. Patricia, can you draft a financial education curriculum that would be appropriate for family members? Of course, she said. I can customize our standard financial literacy program to address the specific issues your family has demonstrated. And Marcus, I need comprehensive documentation of all financial assistance I've provided to my family over the past 5 years, as well as paperwork to establish a formal family foundation with proper governance and oversight. I'll prepare everything, he assured me. A properly structured foundation would provide both tax advantages and the formality you're looking for in future family support. As we continued to develop the plan, I shared what I had discovered about my cousin Megan's situation. That sounds like legitimate hardship, Patricia noted. Very different from the manufactured emergencies you've described from your parents and sister. I'd like to help her, I said, but in a way that doesn't undermine her dignity or independence. Can we establish an anonymous payment for her husband's medical bills and an education trust for their children? Easily, Marcus confirmed. We can route it through the foundation once it's established, with appropriate anonymity protections. By early afternoon, the technical aspects of my plan were in motion. The decoy account was being established, the custom banking application was under development, and the legal documentation was being prepared. But there was one more element I wanted to add: a neutral witness to whatever confrontation might emerge. I picked up my phone and called Pastor David from my parents' church. Though I wasn't particularly religious myself, I had always respected his wisdom and balanced perspective. More importantly, he was someone my parents respected, which might help keep the situation from derailing completely. Eugene, it's good to hear from you, he answered warmly. What can I do for you? I explained that my family was having some discussions about finances and estate planning that had become emotionally charged, and asked if he might be willing to be present as a neutral mediator. Family and money can be a volatile combination, he said thoughtfully. I'd be happy to help facilitate a healthy conversation. When were you thinking? This weekend, I told him. Saturday afternoon at my parents' house. And Pastor David? It might get uncomfortably revealing. I just want you to be prepared for that. In my line of work, uncomfortable revelations are rather common, he replied with gentle humor. I'll be there. With that final piece in place, I called my father to let him know I had made a decision regarding their request. I've thought about what you asked, I told him, keeping my voice neutral. I've set up an account that you and Mom will have access to for family emergencies. That's wonderful news, son, he said, the relief evident in his voice. Your mother will be so pleased. When can we get the details? I thought we could make it a family financial planning session, I suggested. This Saturday afternoon. I've taken the liberty of asking Pastor David to join us, since you've always valued his counsel on important family matters. There was a pause, just long enough to be noticeable. Pastor David. Is that really necessary for a simple financial arrangement? I think having a respected neutral party is always helpful when discussing significant family decisions, I replied smoothly. Besides, he's known our family for years. His presence will keep the conversation focused on what truly matters. After another brief hesitation, my father agreed, and we set the time for 2 o'clock on Saturday. I asked him to make sure Ashley and Uncle Jack would be there as well, explaining that since this was about family financial planning, all key family members should be present. As I ended the call, I felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness for what I had discovered about my family, determination to address the situation constructively, and a surprising sense of liberation. For years, I had been carrying the burden of secret support and unacknowledged responsibility. Whatever happened on Saturday, that pattern would finally end. The following days were a flurry of preparation. The technical team completed the custom banking application and tested it thoroughly. Marcus finalized the legal documents for the family foundation and the anonymous support for Megan's family. Patricia completed both the decoy account setup and the financial education curriculum. On Friday evening, I received a call from Jackson. "Everything's in place," he confirmed. "The technical trigger is set up exactly as you specified. When they hit the threshold of attempted transfers, the full portfolio visualization will display for exactly 60 seconds before the security protocols lock them out completely." "Thank you," I said sincerely. "Not just for the technical help, but for being the one person in my life who's never tried to take advantage. That's what real friendship looks like," he replied simply. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" I considered the question carefully. "Yes," I finally said. "Whatever happens, it's time for the truth. All of it. No more secrets. No more enabling unhealthy patterns. Just clarity. And, hopefully, a path forward. Call me afterward," he instructed. Day or night. I promised I would, and spent the rest of the evening reviewing all aspects of the plan one final time. By the time I went to bed, I felt as prepared as I possibly could be for whatever the next day might bring. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized something important had shifted within me. The hurt and anger were still there, but they no longer controlled my thinking. Instead, I felt clear-eyed and purposeful. My family had forced this moment of reckoning, but I would determine how it unfolded. And perhaps, if we were very fortunate, something healthier might emerge from the ashes of these broken expectations and betrayed trust. Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth and sunshine that seemed at odds with the emotional storm I anticipated. I spent the morning reviewing the final preparations with Patricia and Marcus via video call, then drove to my parents' house, arriving precisely at 2 o'clock. The scene that greeted me was carefully staged, much like our previous emergency meeting. My parents sat together on the couch, presenting a united front. Uncle Jack occupied his usual place in my father's recliner. Ashley perched on the arm of the sofa, scrolling through her phone with affected disinterest. Pastor David had already arrived and was seated in a chair brought in from the dining room, his expression thoughtful but unreadable. "Eugene," my mother greeted me with a tight smile. "Thank you for coming. And for reconsidering our request." I nodded and took the remaining seat, a straight-back chair positioned so that everyone could observe me. The physical arrangement wasn't lost on me. I was being placed in the spotlight, the object of scrutiny, rather than a full participant in a family discussion. "Before we get started," I said calmly, "I want to be clear about what I've decided. I've established an account that Mom and Dad will have access to for genuine family emergencies. But there are some conditions and frameworks we need to discuss." "Conditions?" My father's voice sharpened. "This is family, Eugene, not a business transaction." Pastor David spoke up gently. "Thomas, perhaps we should hear Eugene out. Setting clear expectations can actually strengthen family bonds by preventing misunderstandings." My father subsided, though his expression remained skeptical. I opened my briefcase and removed a folder containing the paperwork for the decoy account, along with 2 smartphones in sealed boxes. "I've opened an account with Fairfield Bank with $80,000, I explained, sliding the paperwork across the coffee table. "I've also provided new smartphones for you both that have the bank's secure app pre-installed. The security features require these specific devices for account access." Mom reached eagerly for the paperwork while Dad examined the phones with surprise. "This seems unnecessarily complicated," he commented. "And expensive. These are the latest models. Security is important," I replied simply. "The phones and account access are linked through biometric verification. It's the safest way to ensure only you two can access the funds." Ashley leaned forward, suddenly interested. 80,000? That's all? I thought your company acquisition would have left you with a lot more than that." I met her gaze steadily. "This is an emergency fund, Ashley, not my entire net worth. And it's specifically for Mom and Dad's needs, not general family distribution." She sat back, clearly disappointed, but trying to hide it. Uncle Jack cleared his throat. "It's a start. I suppose. Though it doesn't address the longer-term security concerns we discussed. We can revisit broader financial planning after we see how this arrangement works, I said neutrally. For now, why don't you both set up your phones? The account will be active as soon as you complete the verification process. The next 30 minutes were consumed with getting my parents' new phones configured and the banking app initialized. I guided them through the process, including the fingerprint and facial recognition security features. Pastor David observed quietly, occasionally asking thoughtful questions about the purpose of various security measures. Once both phones were operational and the app was functioning, I demonstrated how to view the account balance and transfer funds. As you can see, I said, showing them the screen, the current balance is $80,000. You can transfer funds to your existing accounts or make direct payments from here for legitimate expenses. This is very generous, Eugene, Pastor David commented. It's a significant safety net for your parents. My mother was already exploring the app's features. It looks straightforward enough. And we can move money right away if needed? The system requires 24-hour processing for the first transfer, I explained. After that, movements can be same day. It's another security feature to prevent fraud. What I didn't tell them was that this delay would give my team time to monitor and verify the nature of their initial transfers before allowing them to proceed, and would trigger the enhanced surveillance protocols I had established. After answering a few more questions about the technical features, I collected my briefcase and stood. I have another commitment this afternoon, but you have everything you need to get started. If you have any technical questions, there's a support number in the documentation. My father seemed surprised by my abrupt departure. That's it? You're just leaving? The account is set up. You have access. Isn't that what you wanted? I asked simply. He exchanged glances with my mother. Well, yes. But we thought we might discuss some other financial matters while we're all here. Perhaps at our next family gathering, I suggested. I really do need to go now. I said my goodbyes, exchanging a meaningful glance with Pastor David, who nodded slightly in understanding. As I left, I heard Ashley asking my parents to see the account details again, her voice containing poorly concealed excitement. Driving away from my parents' house, I felt a strange hollowness in my chest. The first phase of my plan had been executed flawlessly, but there was no satisfaction in it, only a sad certainty about what would happen next. I didn't have to wait long. Just 3 hours later, as I sat in my apartment reviewing documentation with Marcus, my phone lit up with alerts from the monitoring system. My parents were attempting their first transfers. That was fast, Marcus observed as we viewed the secure dashboard showing their activities. The initial transfer request was from my mother, $15,000 to her personal checking account, categorized as medical expenses. My father followed 20 minutes later with a request for $12,000 to his account for home repairs. Should I approve these? Patricia asked via the conference call we had established. Yes, I confirmed. Let them proceed. We need to establish the pattern. By Sunday morning, the dashboard revealed an additional flurry of activity. Ashley had apparently been given access to the app, something I had anticipated and built into the security protocols, and had attempted to transfer $25,000 directly to her account with the description family loan. Repayment. There was never any loan to repay, Marcus noted, reviewing the documentation. This is a fabrication. She's testing the limits, I said. Approve it, but flag it in the system. More transfers followed throughout Sunday. $10,000 requested as cash withdrawal by my father, $8,000 for emergency vehicle maintenance by my mother, and another $5,000 by Ashley for family expenses. By Monday morning, just 48 hours after I had given them access, they had attempted to transfer or withdraw a total of $75,000 of the $80,000 balance, nearly 94% of the available funds, all categorized as urgent necessities. The trigger threshold I had established was 75% of the balance within the first week. They had exceeded it in just 2 days. "They're not even trying to be subtle," Patricia observed during our morning briefing. "No," I agreed, feeling a deep sadness rather than anger. "They're not." While we were still reviewing the dashboard, a new alert appeared. Someone the logs indicated it was my father's device, was attempting to change the account passwords and remove my access entirely. "That's the second trigger condition," I noted. "Activate the revelation protocol." Patricia confirmed the command, and we watched as the system executed the programmed sequence. For exactly 60 seconds, anyone viewing the banking app would see not the modest $80,000 balance, but a complete visualization of my actual net worth, investments, properties, cash reserves, and the full value of my stake in the acquisition, a total of just over $2.4 billion. After the 60-second display, the system would lock all access, requiring my personal authorization for any further activity. We sat in silence as the protocol completed its sequence. I imagined the scene in my parents' house, the shock, the disbelief, perhaps even some shame as they realized the scale of what they had been attempting to manipulate their way into. "What now?" Marcus asked quietly. "Now we wait," I replied. "The ball is in their court." I didn't have to wait long. Within 15 minutes, my phone began buzzing with calls and texts. I let them go to voicemail, watching as the names cycled through. Mom, Dad, Ashley, Uncle Jack, even some extended family members I rarely heard from. The text messages ranged from confused to demanding, "Eugene, call immediately. There's a problem with the account. What just happened? We need to talk now. Did you seriously have billions this whole time? We need to discuss your financial situation as a family right away." Then, as I had anticipated, the tone began to shift as they realized I wasn't responding immediately. "This is completely unfair, Eugene. Family is supposed to support each other. After all we've done for you. This is how you treat us? You can't just cut us off like this. We're your parents." By early afternoon, word had apparently spread through the extended family. Cousins, aunts, and uncles I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly found reasons to reach out, their messages transparent in their sudden interest in reconnecting. Finally, at exactly 3 o'clock, I received the text I had been waiting for. It was from Pastor David. "Your family is in crisis. Whatever happened has created significant turmoil. They've asked me to mediate an emergency family meeting tonight. Will you come?" I replied simply, "Yes." 7 o'clock. The stage was set for the final confrontation. All my preparation, all the evidence I had gathered, all the legal and financial structures I had put in place, everything was ready. But as evening approached, I found myself neither triumphant nor anxious, only resolved. This wasn't about revenge or even justice in some abstract sense. It was about truth, boundaries, and the possibility, however slim, of genuine transformation. My family had been operating under destructive patterns for years, patterns I had unwittingly enabled through my silence and secret support. Tonight, those patterns would be exposed to the light, and choices would have to be made about what would grow in their place. I arrived at my parents' house precisely at 7, carrying a portfolio containing all the documentation I might need. The driveway was full of cars, not just my parents' and Ashley's, but those of several extended family members as well. It seemed the revelation of my wealth had drawn quite a crowd. The atmosphere inside was charged with tension. The living room had been rearranged to accommodate more people, with extra chairs brought in from the dining room and kitchen. My parents sat on the couch, looking simultaneously angry and anxious. Ashley paced near the window, checking her phone repeatedly. Uncle Jack sat in his usual position of authority. Pastor David stood quietly near the fireplace, his expression grave but composed. The surprise was the number of extended family members present. Aunt Meredith and her husband, 3 cousins I rarely saw, even my mother's sister from Columbus who typically only visited at Christmas. All of them fell silent when I entered, their expressions ranging from curiosity to poorly concealed avarice. "Eugene," my father said, rising. His tone attempted authority but wavered slightly. "We need to discuss what happened yesterday." "Yes," I agreed calmly, taking the single empty chair that had clearly been left for me. "We do." Pastor David stepped forward. "Before we begin, I want to establish some ground rules for this discussion. One person speaks at a time. We focus on understanding, not accusations. And we remember that regardless of circumstances, we are family, which means we treat each other with respect." There were murmurs of agreement, though Ashley rolled her eyes visibly. "Eugene," Pastor David continued, "would you like to explain what occurred yesterday with the bank account you established?" I placed my portfolio on the coffee table and met each family member's gaze before speaking. I gave my parents access to an account I established for family emergencies. Within 48 hours, they attempted to transfer out 94% of the funds and remove my access entirely. When that happened, the security system revealed my actual financial position before locking them out. "Security system?" My father interjected angrily. "You were spying on us." "I was protecting my assets," I corrected gently. "And given what happened, it was clearly necessary." "The point isn't what we did with the account," my mother cut in. "It's what you've been hiding from us all this time. You're a billionaire, Eugene. A billionaire! And you've let your family struggle financially for years." Several relatives murmured in agreement, their expressions hardening. "Am I?" I asked quietly. "Have I really let you struggle?" I opened my portfolio and removed the first document, a comprehensive record of all the financial assistance I had provided to my parents over the past 5 years. I handed copies to my parents and Pastor David. "This is a complete accounting of the support I've provided," I explained. "The anonymous credit card payoffs, the loans that were never expected to be repaid, the great deals I found on cars and home repairs. In total, I've given you over $300,000 in the past 5 years alone, all while maintaining the fiction that I was merely doing well in my career." My parents stared at the document in shock. My father recovered first. "If you had all this money, why were you being so secretive and stingy with it? 300,000 is nothing to a billionaire." "It's not about the amount," I said. "It's about how it was being used and the relationship it was creating between us." I removed another document, the evidence of how my medical emergency funds had been diverted to Ashley's Mercedes down payment. I placed it on the coffee table, where everyone could see the email exchanges. "When I discovered that the $50,000 I gave you for Aunt Meredith's supposed medical expenses was actually used to help Ashley buy a luxury car, I started investigating more closely." Aunt Meredith gasped. "My medical expenses?" "Thomas, you told everyone Eugene refused to help with my hospital bills. I paid those bills anonymously," I told her gently. "All $50,000. But Mom and Dad were simultaneously telling you I wouldn't help, while telling me they needed money for your care, then giving that money to Ashley for a car down payment." The room erupted into chaos. Accusations flew between family members. Ashley began crying theatrically, claiming she'd known nothing about where the money came from. Uncle Jack attempted to restore order while shooting me venomous glances. Pastor David finally managed to quiet everyone. "Please," he said firmly. "This accomplishes nothing. Eugene, I sense you have more to share with us." I nodded and produced the next document printouts of the emails discussing how to potentially have me declared mentally unfit to control my own finances. "This was perhaps the most painful discovery," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "A coordinated plan to question my mental competence in order to gain control of my assets." My father's face drained of color. My mother began to stammer denials. Uncle Jack stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous," he blustered. "A wealthy young man should support his family. That's the natural order of things. If you weren't willing to do it voluntarily, we had to consider alternatives." "Alternatives like declaring me mentally incompetent?" I asked. like conspiring to gain control of my finances through deception. That's not family support, Uncle Jack. That's exploitation. The mood in the room shifted perceptibly. Some of the extended family members began to look uncomfortable, edging away from Uncle Jack both literally and figuratively. Ashley, sensing the changing tide, attempted a new approach. "Eugene," she said tearfully, "we're your family. We love you. Yes, maybe things got out of hand, but we've always been there for you. Shouldn't family share with family? Is that what this is about?" I asked quietly. Sharing? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like taking. Taking without asking. Taking without gratitude. Taking without end. I stood up, addressing the entire room now. I've never objected to supporting family through genuine hardships. What I object to is the deception, the manipulation, and the entitlement. Each of you here tonight came running at the first hint of significant wealth. Where were you when I was working 3 jobs to put myself through college? Where were you when I was living on ramen noodles to build my company? The silence that fell was profound. Several family members looked away, unable to meet my gaze. In that moment of clarity, I noticed someone standing quietly in the doorway to the dining room, who hadn't been there when I arrived. My cousin Megan, Uncle Jack's daughter. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw both understanding and sadness in her expression. "There's something else I discovered during my investigation," I continued more gently. "Something that showed me what genuine family need looks like." I produced the final document, the records I had compiled of Megan's situation. Her husband's cancer diagnosis, their depleted savings, the extra shifts she was working to make ends meet. Megan has been facing a true family emergency. Her husband is fighting for his life. They've spent everything they have on treatments. Their children are suffering. And yet, unlike everyone in this room, Megan never asked me, or apparently anyone, for financial help. All eyes turned to Megan, who looked startled and embarrassed to be the sudden center of attention. "I didn't want to be a burden," she said softly. "Everyone has their own problems. That," I said firmly, "is the difference between genuine need and entitlement, between dignity and exploitation." I returned to my seat and removed the final set of documents from my portfolio. I came here tonight, not just to confront what's happened, but to propose a way forward. I've established a family foundation with $10 million in initial funding. The foundation will provide support for genuine family needs, medical emergencies, education, housing stability, but with proper governance and oversight. I handed the documentation to Pastor David. The foundation will be managed by a board that includes both family members and independent trustees. All distributions will require documentation of genuine need and, in most cases, completion of a financial literacy program that I've had developed specifically for our family circumstances. "You're making us jump through hoops for access to your money," my father protested, though with less conviction than before. "I'm establishing a framework for healthy support, rather than enabling destructive patterns," I corrected. "And I'm creating accountability, something that's been sorely lacking." I turned to address Megan directly. "The foundation's first actions have already been taken. Your husband's medical bills have been paid in full, and a trust has been established for your children's education." Megan's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Eugene, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," I assured her. "That's what family is supposed to be, supporting each other through genuine hardships, without expectation or manipulation." The atmosphere in the room had transformed completely. What had begun as an angry confrontation had evolved into something more complex, a painful but necessary excavation of long-buried family dynamics. Pastor David cleared his throat. "I think what Eugene is offering is both generous and wise. Structure and accountability aren't punishments. They're foundations for healthier relationships." My mother was crying quietly now, whether from shame, relief, or some combination. I couldn't tell. My father sat staring at his hands. Ashley had retreated to the corner, her expression unreadable. Uncle Jack looked thoroughly deflated. The family patriarch suddenly diminished. "I don't expect immediate acceptance or understanding," I said, gathering my remaining documents. "This is a lot to process. The foundation paperwork includes contact information for the trustees. Anyone with genuine needs can apply for assistance through the proper channels." I stood, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of the evening. "I should go now. You all have a lot to discuss, I imagine." As I headed for the door, Pastor David followed me. "That was difficult," he said quietly. "But necessary, I think. Are you all right?" I considered the question seriously. "I will be," I finally answered. "This isn't how I wanted things to be, but it's a step toward something more honest." "Honesty is always the beginning of healing," he replied. "Give them time." "This is a shock on many levels." I nodded and continued to my car, feeling both drained and strangely lightened. The confrontation I had dreaded for days was over. The truth was finally in the open. What would grow from this painful clearing remained to be seen, but at least the ground had been prepared for something more authentic to take root. The weeks following that dramatic family confrontation were quiet ones. I returned to my normal routines: consulting work, investment oversight, the volunteer coding classes I taught at the community center. But beneath the surface of that ordinary schedule, significant changes were unfolding in my family dynamic. The first sign of transformation came, surprisingly, from my father. 10 days after our confrontation, he requested a meeting, just the two of us, at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. I agreed, unsure what to expect. When I arrived, he was already there, looking somehow older and less certain than I had ever seen him. He stood awkwardly when I approached, as if unsure whether to shake my hand or attempt a hug. We settled for a nod and sat down with our coffees. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began after an uncomfortable silence, "and talking with Pastor David about everything that happened." I waited, giving him space to find his words. "I was wrong," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "Deeply wrong. Not just about the money, but about how I've treated you your entire life." It was perhaps the first time I had ever heard my father admit being wrong about anything significant, and the shock of it must have shown on my face. "I've always favored Ashley," he continued. "I told myself it was because she needed more help, more guidance. But that wasn't it. She was just easier, more like me, more willing to play along with what I wanted. You were always so independent, so capable." I think I resented that, in some way. He stared down at his coffee. "When we found out about your financial success, I convinced myself we deserved a share. That it was only fair, given how we'd raised you. But that was just entitlement talking. It hurt," I admitted quietly. "Finding out how you really saw me, how you were willing to manipulate me." He nodded, accepting the truth of it. "I know. And I don't expect immediate forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm committed to changing. I've enrolled in the financial literacy program you established. I'm working with a therapist to understand why I've made the choices I have. And I'm trying to be honest with myself, with your mother, with you." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start, perhaps the most genuine conversation we had ever had. We talked for nearly 2 hours that afternoon, painfully at times, but with growing moments of real connection. When we parted, something had shifted between us, not healed completely, but at least acknowledged and open to the possibility of growth. My mother's transformation took a different path. Rather than a direct confrontation with what had happened, she immersed herself in the work of the family foundation. To my surprise, she revealed organizational skills and attention to detail that I had never witnessed before. Working with the foundation trustees, she developed outreach programs to connect family members with not just financial resources but also mental health support, career counseling, and educational opportunities. I spent so many years worrying about appearances. She confessed to me one afternoon as we reviewed foundation proposals together. What the neighbors thought, what my sisters thought, what my college friends would think of our house, our cars, our vacations. I never stopped to consider what all that striving was doing to our family. The most dramatic change came from my sister Ashley. The initial weeks after the confrontation, she avoided me completely, her only communications coming through angry text messages blaming me for tearing the family apart. But reality has a way of asserting itself, and Ashley's lifestyle quickly became unsustainable without the family subsidy she had grown accustomed to. The Mercedes was returned. The designer shopping ceased. For perhaps the first time in her adult life, Ashley had to confront the actual numbers in her bank account and the limits they imposed. 3 months after our confrontation, she contacted me with a surprising request. Not for money, but for job assistance. She had applied for an entry-level position with a marketing firm and wanted advice on her resume and interview preparation. I agreed cautiously, still wary of manipulation. But our meeting revealed a version of Ashley I barely recognized. Humbled, yes, but also more authentic than she had been in years. "I've been thinking about what you said," she told me, as we worked on her resume together. "About taking versus sharing. I've been a taker my whole life from mom and dad, from boyfriends, from you. I never developed any real skills because I never needed to. Everything was always handed to me." Her self-awareness caught me off guard. "That's insightful," I managed. She smiled ruefully. "Don't look so shocked. Hitting rock bottom will do that for you." When all the financial cushions disappeared, I had to actually look at myself. It wasn't a pretty picture. Ashley did get that marketing job, and to everyone's surprise, she excelled at it. The charm and social skills that she had previously used for manipulation turned out to be valuable assets in a professional context when channeled productively. 6 months later, she was promoted to account manager. As for the extended family, the patterns varied. Some relatives, like Uncle Jack, withdrew almost completely, unable or unwilling to adapt to the new reality where money wasn't available without accountability. Others engaged cautiously with the foundation, gradually building more authentic relationships as they discovered that genuine need was met with genuine support, just with appropriate structure and expectations. Cousin Megan's situation evolved in particularly satisfying ways. Her husband's treatment was successful, and with the financial pressure relieved, she was able to reduce her nursing hours to spend more time with her children. The following year, with seed funding from the foundation, she launched a patient advocacy service to help other families navigate the complexities of serious illness and insurance systems, turning her painful experience into support for others. The family foundation itself exceeded my initial hopes. Rather than simply functioning as a financial resource, it became a centralizing force for family connection. Quarterly meetings evolved from formal business discussions to meaningful gatherings where family members shared not just financial updates, but personal achievements, challenges, and growth. On a personal level, the most profound change was in my own relationship with wealth and family. For years, I had kept my financial situation secret out of fear. Fear of being valued only for my money, fear of destroying authentic connections, fear of the responsibilities that would come with acknowledgement. But secrecy had created its own problems, enabling unhealthy patterns and preventing honest conversations. Now, with everything in the open, I could engage more authentically with both my wealth and my family. I expanded my philanthropic work beyond the family foundation, focusing on educational access and technological literacy for underserved communities. I also began cautiously dating again, now able to be open about my financial situation from the beginning rather than hiding it as a test of character. 1 year after the confrontation that had changed everything, we gathered for Thanksgiving at my new house, a comfortable but not ostentatious home. I had purchased with a large enough dining room to accommodate everyone. As I looked around the table, I saw a family still in progress, still healing, still learning but fundamentally transformed. My father, now retired from teaching and serving as a foundation trustee, discussing a financial literacy program he was developing for high school students. My mother, proudly showing photos of the community garden she had started with foundation support. Ashley, animated as she described her latest successful marketing campaign. Megan and her husband, their children playing happily with cousins they had barely known a year earlier. We weren't perfect. There were still moments of tension, old habits that threatened to resurface, wounds not fully healed. But we were engaged in the messy, necessary work of building authentic relationships based on respect rather than exploitation, on genuine care rather than obligation. As I observed this transformed gathering, I realized that what had initially felt like the destruction of my family had actually been its salvation. By bringing the truth into the light, painful as that had been, we had created space for something more genuine to grow. The true value of wealth, I had discovered, wasn't in the dollars accumulated or the luxuries afforded. It was in the possibility of choice, of intentionality, of creating structures that supported growth rather than dependency. By establishing clear boundaries and expectations, I hadn't pushed my family away. I had given us all the opportunity to connect in healthier ways. Later that evening, as the gathering was winding down, my father found me alone on the back porch, watching the sunset. "I never properly thanked you," he said quietly. "For what?" I asked. "For having the courage to confront us. It would have been easier to just cut us off completely, or to keep enabling our worst behaviors. Instead, you chose the hardest path, holding up a mirror and then offering a way forward. It was a gift, though it took me some time to see it that way." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I didn't do it perfectly. None of us are perfect," he replied with a small smile. "But we're learning. Together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, I reflected on the journey of the past year, from secrets and manipulation to truth and transformation. The path had been painful, but the destination was worth it. A family built on authenticity, accountability, and genuine care rather than obligation and entitlement. The wealth that had nearly torn us apart had become, instead, the catalyst for rebuilding something stronger, not because of the dollars themselves, but because of the values and structures we had created around them. In showing my family my real balance, I had ultimately shown them something far more valuable: the possibility of real connection, built on truth, rather than convenience or exploitation. It turned out that the most valuable inheritance I could offer wasn't financial at all, but the opportunity to develop integrity, responsibility, and authentic relationship. And that, unlike money, was a resource that grew rather than diminished when shared. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members who felt entitled to your resources, whether financial, emotional, or time-based? I'd love to hear how you navigated those challenging conversations. Comment below with your experiences, like if this story resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about family dynamics and personal growth, and share with someone who might be struggling with similar situations. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it offers some perspective or encouragement for your own family challenges.